I'm Tony Perkins with Washington Watch. Each day, this program provides a biblical perspective on news, including insightful interviews with elected leaders, newsmakers, and cultural experts. I want to thank you for joining us today. We have a great program coming up, but first, here are some headlines from our friends with FISM News.
For FISM News, I'm Samuel Case with today's news update. President Joe Biden's attorneys say the FBI did not find any classified documents during its 3-hour search of Biden's beach house in Rehoboth, Delaware, but it did say the FBI did take some materials for further review.
In a planned consensual search with the Justice Department, they went through the Rehoboth beach house and no classified marked documents were found. This is consistent, I think, with the president from the very beginning of having total cooperation with the Justice Department as it goes through this ongoing investigation, and that will continue.
The Wednesday search is the latest expansion of the probe into Biden's mishandling of classified documents from his time in the Senate and as vice president. This latest search also comes as news dropped this week that the FBI searched Joe Biden's office at the Penn Biden Center in D.C. months ago. That's a detail not originally shared by the White House or the Department of Justice. Meanwhile, the House Judiciary Committee held hearings on the migrant crisis yesterday. Let's go to FISM's Ian Patrick for more details on this.
Thank you so much, Sam. Well, border security and the flood of deadly fentanyl into the U.S. were the focus of Wednesday's House Judiciary Committee hearings on the migrant crisis, the first in what is to be a planned series of hearings on the record-shattering influx of migrants into the U.S. under the Biden administration. Committee Chair Jim Jordan opened the hearings with an accusation that the Biden administration is intentionally fueling the migrant surge and has no operational control of the border.
The Biden administration does not have operational control of the border. Month after month after month, we have set records for migrants coming into the country. And frankly, I think it's intentional. I don't know how anyone with common sense or logic can reach any other conclusion. It seems deliberate, it seems premeditated, it seems intentional.
Lawmakers heard testimony from 2 Texas county judges, an Arizona sheriff, and from Brandon Dunn, who is the co-founder of the Forever 15 Project, a nonprofit fentanyl poisoning awareness group.
Thanks for that update, Ian. Meanwhile, let's turn our attention internationally, where the Philippines is granting the U.S. greater access to its military bases. This news was confirmed by their defense chiefs on Thursday. The news also comes amid mounting concern over China's increasing aggression in the South China Sea, as well as China's rising hostility towards Taiwan. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says the U.S. will have access to 4 more bases under the 2014 Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Here he is.
We remain committed to our extended deterrence commitment, and we're very serious about that when it comes to the ROK. And we will continue to work alongside our allies and train and ensure that we maintain credible and ready forces.
For its part, China called the move an escalation in tensions that could undermine regional stability. Meanwhile, back in the U.S., the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms just released the federal government's most expansive report on guns and crime in over 20 years. This report showed an increase in ghost gun seizures and gun crimes committed with legally purchased firearms. The report was requested by AG Merrick Garland and also comes as Democrats are calling for stricter gun control measures in the country. In some other quick headlines, House Republicans passed a bill to end COVID telework policies for executive agencies. Meanwhile, Republicans also voted to remove Representative Ilhan Omar from the Foreign Affairs Committee. And finally, in the economy, the Federal Reserve raised the interest rates by 0.25% as it continues to try to tackle inflation and get it under control. With that, those are today's headlines from FISM News. Once again, I'm Samuel Case. As usual, if you want to read about these stories in more detail, you can always check them out on our website. It's fismnews.tv. And you can always tune into our full show tonight. That'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, fism.tv/watch. Don't forget, you can also download the FISM app as well. Stay tuned for Washington Watch with Tony Perkins. I'll see you tomorrow with more news coverage.
From the heart of our nation's capital, here's Family Research Council President Tony Perkins.
Welcome to Washington Watch. Thanks so much for joining me. Coming up on this Thursday edition. Yesterday, as we discussed, was a national gathering for prayer and repentance here in Washington at the Museum of the Bible. Today, it was a national prayer breakfast on Capitol Hill, a much different event. I joined House Majority Leader Steve Scalise at the Capitol to hear the remarks of the guest speakers, including President Biden.
Let's start treating each other with respect. That's what Kevin and I are going to do. Not a joke. We had a good meeting yesterday.
Well, apparently that call for respect does not mean that the fear-mongering will stop.
So the bottom line is simple. Playing games with the debt ceiling is dangerous, destabilizing, and would spell disaster for every single American. Dangerous, destabilizing, disaster.
That was Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer today, fear-mongering on the Senate floor. As was made clear yesterday on this program, once again, there's plenty of time to reach a consensus on a responsible way forward as it pertains to the debt ceiling. Now, Speaker McCarthy made clear again today that raising the debt ceiling will require spending reforms.
We will not pass a clean debt ceiling here without some form of spending reform. So there'll never be a clean one. I don't know how they want to say it, that's fine. But at the end of the day, we're going to get spending reforms. I believe you have to lift the debt ceiling, but you do not lift the debt ceiling without changing your behavior. So
we'll talk with New Jersey Congressman Chris Smith in just a moment. The drip, drip, drip of documents continues.
Karine, what is the current number of documents bearing classified markings that have been found in the president's residences and offices?
I would refer you to the White House counsel's office.
Okay. And Ian just declined to comment on that as well.
There you go. You got your answer.
You may not have heard, he said, well, I asked, and they wouldn't say. Well, that was White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre responding to that reporter's question about the lack of information from the White House on the classified documents that are being found in the president's homes and his offices. I mean, what happened to transparency? We're going to talk with South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman a little later here on Washington Watch. As the Biden administration and the left continues to push their destructive transgender agenda, more and more states are pushing back. Nebraska is one of those states. Nebraska State Senator Kathleen Kauth has introduced a measure entitled Let Them Grow. She joins us later to explain. And finally, the cancel culture continues.
We acknowledge that we may never know the exact mindset of the decision makers who decided to join hand in glove with progressives' drive to silence our opposition. But what we know is more than enough. Democrats asked and DirecTV delivered.
That was Colorado Congressman Ken Buck on the House floor discussing DirecTV's latest attack on conservative speech. We'll be joined by the target of that attack. Chris Ruddy, the CEO of Newsmax, joins me later here on Washington Watch. The website, TonyPerkins.com, lots of resources there for you. Be sure and check it out. Our word for today comes from Jeremiah 11, verses 9 and 10. And the Lord said to me, a conspiracy has been found among the men of Judah and among the inhabitants of Jerusalem. A conspiracy? What was that conspiracy? Well, we look in verse 10 to find out. They have turned back to their iniquities, the iniquities of their forefathers who refused to hear my words, and they have gone after other gods to serve them. The house of Israel and the house of Judah have broken my covenant, which I made with their fathers. Well, let's first define what's a conspiracy. It's an intentional, willful act of evil, of sin. They had repented, they turned back, but then after taking a pledge to uphold the covenant, they willfully, with intent, started doing exactly what their fathers had done, refusing to listen to God, refusing to follow God, trading the truth for a lie. And folks, that's the same conspiracy we see today, trading the truth for a lie. To find out more about our Bible reading plan, go to frc.org/Bible. A day after his White House meeting with President Biden to discuss the debt ceiling impasse, Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy remains optimistic that a deal can be reached to address our nation's nearly $32 trillion debt. Will the Democrats' fear-mongering make it difficult for Congress to reach an acceptable deal? Joining me now to discuss this and much more is Congressman Chris Smith. He is one of the two most senior members in the House of Representatives, having served since 1981. He's on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. He's also the co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission and the House Pro-Life Caucus, and he was recently reappointed as the chairman of the Congressional Executive Commission on China. He represents the 4th Congressional District of New Jersey. Congressman Smith, welcome back to the program.
Tony, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Let me first get your thoughts on Speaker McCarthy's meeting with President Biden yesterday.
Well, I think it's important that there be dialogue. I think the President of the United States was absurd when he said no negotiations. He already had one now. And I thought, the effort to attach significant budget savings has to be pursued. Tony, you'll recall, I was here in 1995 when we did Graham-Rudman. That was attached to a debt limit increase. The 2011 Budget Control Act saved some $2.1 trillion. That was attached to a debt limit increase. And frankly, in 93 and 97, budget deals were put together, and that finally got us to a balanced budget, all attached to a debt limit increase. So this is an opportunity that has to be seized, especially with the $31.5 trillion budget deficit that we're dealing with.
So Congressman, we heard the president actually sat next to Kevin Speaker McCarthy at the prayer gathering this morning. I was just a couple rows behind him. And so the president made those comments about having respect and working together, and they looked like they got along. They were talking. But then you have Senator Schumer, the leader in the Senate, over there making all of these comments about how the Republicans are going to destroy the country. They're wanting to cut Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. And we know those things are not true. And we know we have time to reach a deal. Is that going to make it harder for the two parties to come together?
There's no doubt it makes it harder. And I think the American public are sick and tired of reckless hyperbole of that kind, and Schumer certainly excels in it. The lie that we've had for decades about cutting Medicare and Social Security. I remember when Claude Pepper, now I'm going back to the 80s, when we were talking about trying to save Social Security, went to people's districts, pointed to that individual member, in absentia, of course, they weren't really there, and said, this man's the enemy of Social Security. We call it Mediscare because they do it with Medicare as well.
Right.
And I hope the people are tired of the Democrats demagoguing those issues. We're going to keep our commitment to our senior citizens, and we're going to do it robustly.
We've had the chairman of the committee on the program making very clear there will be no cuts to any of those programs. We don't need to cut those programs. It's just the wasteful spending that has been made, and the money, even from COVID, that's still out there that hasn't been spent. So
exactly,
it's all fear mongering. But I want to move on. Before we run out of time, I want to get to a topic that you and I both are passionate about. You reappointed as the chairman of the Congressional Executive Commission on China, and then this week you've introduced legislation that would tie China's trade privileges. They flooded America with cheap products, driven out American jobs, most of the time doing that with slave labor from China. You are now, for the first time since Bill Clinton, wanting to reattach their trade privileges with their human rights treatment.
Exactly. Tony, the shame of Bill Clinton is that he got it at first. He linked MFN, most favored nation status, which is critical to the export economy of China, with human rights. Then 1 year later, and I actually made a trip over to China, met with foreign ministry people who said, he's bluffing, and he was bluffing. He ripped up his human rights language, where serious and sustained progress needed to be made in order to get this huge trade benefit, which helps the Chinese economy, really doesn't help ours. So I've reintroduced that whole concept and that bill. I think the time has come. American corporations have enabled not only the military expansionism of Xi Jinping, the dictator in China, but also their security apparatus that oppresses its own people each and every day. So we need to say, China, we'll trade with you, but with conditionality. It has to be human rights, and I'm going to push very hard for it.
So in this legislation, it's not just about economic benefit that China has with flooding our markets with cheap products made from labor that's in concentration camps in some cases. But this also goes on to dealing with the organ harvesting that's been taking place of political prisoners, the economic espionage that's been taking place. And I mean, I think they have corrupted our university system. They have corrupted big business. We were told, I wasn't here, you were, but I do know, I heard the debate. We were told, let's just open up the markets, give them most favored nation status, and we'll change China. I don't think that's happened. I think China has changed Wall Street, and I think it's changed our university system for the worse.
Without a doubt. I've argued, and when Clinton delinked human rights from trade, May 26, 1994, I did a press conference, and everything I said there, and I'm no prophet, has come true. They have changed. We have changed, I should say, particularly the corporate mentality in this country to pander, to do whatever they can to get cheap products and cheap labor with very too little or no protections like occupational safety. So there's a lot of people who die in China while they're making products. All of that, plus this not new, but ever worsening organ harvesting issue. I have another bill that I'm trying to get marked up, hopefully on the 28th of this coming month, about February, that will significantly go after this barbaric practice of the Chinese Communist Party to kill religious freedom advocates, to kill Falun Gong practitioners, Uyghurs, Christians, Catholics, and Tibetan Buddhists. Average age 28, 50 to 100,000 people per year, and the number is going up, to take their organs, 2 to 3 per person. It is barbaric. It is Nazi-like.
Yeah.
It's going on right now, as you know so well. And they target the healthiest people who happen to be religious people or Falun Gong practitioners because of their lifestyle and because they have an extreme prejudice against them.
Yeah, and we want to follow that. And that's the benefit of the Republicans having control of committees. I know where it's not going to get through the Senate and to the president most likely, but it will educate. It'll educate the American public, and it'll set the stage for later. Very quick, I got 30 seconds left. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar removed from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Quickly, your thoughts on that?
Well, I voted for removal. My belief is that when Israel itself is facing an existential threat from Hamas, especially from Iran, Hezbollah, and for her to be making reckless statements about how the United States and Israel are the equivalent of the Taliban, that has real implications in the real world, especially in the Middle East, and especially for our great friend and ally, Israel. So I think she could be on other committees, but not on foreign affairs.
I agree 100%. I think it was should have been done a long time ago. Congressman Chris Smith, always great to see you. Thank you for your leadership on so many issues on Capitol Hill that we care very deeply
Tony,
about.
thank you for your leadership. You've been an amazing leader, especially on religious freedom.
All right, have a great weekend.
Thank you.
All right, FBI agents searched President Biden's beach house yesterday in an ongoing probe into the president's mishandling of classified documents. According to reports, the effort yielded no additional documents with confidential markings. However, they did take away some material. The president's own attorneys were able to put a spin on what they found and how they found it. We're going to talk about this next. Big difference the way they treated Donald Trump and the way they are treating Joe Biden. Going to talk with Congressman Ralph Norman right after the break. Don't go away.
Everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Welcome back to Washington Watch. I'm Tony Perkins, your host. Good to have you with us on this Thursday. As I said at the top of the program, it's kind of a drip of documents. Every time we turn around, we're hearing more about a search of documents. Well, the press, believe it or not, the media, finally get a little irritated, asking questions of the White House about their transparency. Play clip number 6, please.
Can you assure us that the White House has been and continues to be as transparent as possible, meaning that where there haven't been disclosures, something has prevented that?
What I can say is what the president has said many times, and you've seen it in our statements, is that we are cooperating fully. The president and his team is cooperating fully, and we will continue to do that. And I'll just leave it there.
Again, that was White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre putting the White House spin on stuff. Well, yesterday, FBI agents searched President Biden's Rehoboth beach house in the ongoing probe into the president's mishandling of classified documents. Now, according to the reports, the effort yielded no additional documents with classified markings, although they did take away what they described as notes and notebooks and some things of that nature. But here's what we know is that the president's personal attorney is the one that's been describing the searches to the media. Now, the contrast between yesterday's FBI expedition and how a weaponized Department of Justice treated former President Trump could not be more apparent. Joining me now to discuss this is Congressman Ralph Norman. He serves on the House Budget Committee, the Rules Committee, the Financial Services Committee. He represents the 5th Congressional District of South Carolina. Congressman Norman, welcome back to the program.
Great to be with you, Tony. Thank you.
All right. According to reports, the FBI agreed to a written litany of terms before conducting this search. Now, this is quite a contrast to what they did when they raided President Trump's home. I mean, what are we to make of this?
Two-tiered system of justice, one for Democrats, one for Republicans, particularly with Donald Trump. Tony, look at the differences. I mean, with Donald Trump, you had the sirens blaring, you had the 27 FBI agents, you had the media there. They asked to turn the cameras off. They would not let President Trump's attorneys in the room when they were searching the documents. Contrast that with what happened to Biden. Not only did they know about it prior to the midterm elections, they held it, both the Department of Justice, FBI, they held it secret until after the midterms. And then in January, they started searching for it. But you notice they're letting Biden's attorneys go through all the documents. And when are they going to start defining what they're finding? I mean, does a box of documents, what's in there? How are they classified? Where are they looking? How did they know to go there in the first place? And the first thing I saw when I saw his house, I knew he had 2 or 3 houses. And, how'd they pick, the Penn Center? The Penn Center is a recipient of $54 million from the Chinese, and I visited there last week. You know what it is? It's in a larger building. It's square footage in a larger building. How in the world where they spent the $54 million is a mystery to me. It's dark now. But, it's just a two-tier system of justice. It's so corrupt.
Well, I want to go back to this point because it really, there's so many areas of contrast here. But as you pointed out, his attorneys were there for the raid, and his attorneys are the ones that are actually reporting this information to the press. And they're putting such a spin on it. Here's his attorney, Mr. Bauer, saying, consistent with the process in Wilmington, the DOJ took for further review some materials and handwritten notes that appear to relate to his time as vice president, referring to the documents they found in his residence. Now, today, with the president's full support and cooperation, DOJ is conducting a planned search of his home in Delaware. Now, I mean, putting the most positive spin on this, and again, this is to contrast to how you said they came in with raids, lights, sirens going into President Trump's home. This has to be shaking the American public's confidence in our justice system.
Well, you ought to be up here with us serving. I mean, it's a tragedy what's happening, and it's not just. I mean, it's at every level. I was on the oversight committee with Jody Heiss and asking for documents from this administration on anything. They stonewall it, and they won't give it. And just like Jean-Claude Pierre saying, it's what Biden says. When have his words meant anything? They haven't. And so the American people are going to have to rise up, and we've got a real problem. The FBI is supposed to set the gold standard for justice, and they're sold out, and it's very, very disturbing.
Well, I'm hoping that these congressional hearings on the weaponization of government will give us some information and let the public know even more what's happening. Before we run out of time, Congressman, I want to switch gears very quickly because you've got a really important piece of legislation that you have introduced, Ensuring Accurate and Complete Abortion Data Reporting Act. This would simply make states or encourage states, incentivize states to report to the CDC information regarding abortion so that we know what's going on.
Well, first of all, Tony, states don't have to do it, as you mentioned. Family planning is supposed to prevent abortions. And the fact is, we need to know how many abortions are being performed. And so what we've done is tie it to, if they're not going to provide the information, which I know they have, each hospital keeps meticulous records. If they don't provide it, then we're going to look at the funding and see, hold the funding until they provide what we should have, and it really should not even have to ask for. And we'll see what happens. It's it's a miscarriage of justice, and the administration should be leading the way, but they're just not.
30 seconds, Congressman. Why do they not want to report the numbers?
I don't think they want the American people to know what's going on. Yeah. The doctors don't want it out on who's actually performing the abortions. The fetuses, the parts that are being used in ways that should not be used on the death of a child, they don't want that out. So it's collusion to keep information from the American people.
It's an open, dark secret. Congressman, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
All right. Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina. Another great guy on Capitol Hill fighting for things that we care about. Coming up, we'll discuss important legislation being considered in Nebraska to protect vulnerable minors from experimental gender transition procedures. Now, this is a pushback that's happening in states all across the nation as the Biden administration and the left is pushing this transgender agenda. Everything from bathrooms to having healthy body parts cut off. That's what the Biden administration is pushing. Well, states are pushing back. We'll talk about it next. Don't go away.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. Leah Sheribu, a Christian teenager in Nigeria, remains a captive of Boko Haram for her refusal to renounce her Christian faith. Chinese pastor Wang Yi is serving a 9-year sentence for speaking publicly against the Chinese government. All of this because people in power decided different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
I'm Tony Perkins, and this is Washington Watch. The website, tonyperkins.com. Be sure and check it out. Lots of resources there for you and contact information for our guest that we have on the program. And by the way, I want to, time to time I mention this, but it's always good to encourage those elected officials to come on the program. You know, I have mostly men and women on who are serving you, serving the Lord. We have mostly conservatives on the program, giving them a platform to tell you what they're actually doing. And they're fighting the good fight. You heard Chris Smith earlier. He's been up here fighting for a long time. It's always good for them to hear positive reinforcement. So if you get a chance, send them a note, say thank you. Hey, it was great to hear you on Washington Watch. Thanks for fighting for faith, family, and freedom. You know, and we've been talking about that fight. One of the issues we've been discussing on this program is, you know, protecting vulnerable children from experimental gender transition procedures. Now, what's interesting, we talked about this yesterday, many European nations are rapidly moving away to discourage this type of surgery and treatments, and some are even banning it. Now, they were far ahead of us, and they're reaping the, I guess I'm looking for the word, they're reaping the negative outcomes of this, and they're saying, hey, we don't need to do this. Well, the United States, even seeing that, we're marching down this path. This administration pushing this at every turn. But legislators in states all across the country are saying, hey, we're not going to let this happen to our children. And we're seeing this now in the state of Nebraska. They've introduced a measure called Let Them Grow. It's the Let Them Grow Act, which would protect minors from these life-altering surgeries. Join me now to discuss this is the author of the bill, State Senator Kathleen Kauth. She represents Nebraska's 31st District. Senator, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being on.
Well, tell us about the bill you've introduced and what it does.
So Let Them Grow is designed to protect youth who are experiencing gender dysphoria. It bans cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers, and surgeries under the age of 19. And in the state of Nebraska, 19 is the age of majority. And it's not targeting trans. It's not doing anything other than trying to protect them from these incredibly damaging treatments that are irreversible. And at that age, no child can determine whether or not they really want to do this.
And we also know that the statistics show us that most of the children suffering from gender dysphoria, they move through that phase. If they are able to develop normally, they usually come out on the other side.
Yeah, if left alone with other therapies, but not socially transitioning, over 85% of these kids desist from the gender dysphoria. So if they start doing the transitioning, when they start the hormones, when they start the social transitioning aspect of it, almost 100% of them wind up going through with complete surgery. That's a huge swing between people who would desist and then 100% actually going through with it. So we know once you start down this very, very slippery slope, there's really no other outcome for these kids. And that is, again, these are irreversible procedures.
Well, but we have many that regret it after the fact, even though they continue with the treatments and go down that path. They detransitioned because they realized this was a phase. It was not, there were other issues that needed to be dealt with.
Exactly. And one of the things that is hardest for these kids, especially, is they don't have the capacity to think long term.
Right.
I'm meeting with a youth and his mom, who the youth is going through gender dysphoria, very much upset with me for bringing this bill up. And one of the things that he said was, well, if I don't like it, I'll just reverse it later. Now, this is a 16-year-old kid for whom he doesn't understand how difficult and complicated the entire procedure will be, how those changes will never go away, and how you cannot reattach parts or reinstall your puberty once you've taken it away.
I mean, there's so many examples of what we restrict when it comes to minors. I mean, we don't let them drive. In many states, they're not allowed to get tattoos without parental authority. I mean, there's just so many things because of what you just said. They cannot fully understand the consequences of the decisions they make. All right, you have another bill dealing with protecting girls' sports. We only have about a minute and a half left, but I want you to talk about that bill and how our listeners in Nebraska can help you.
So the second bill is LB 575, and that is called Sports and Spaces. And it protects girls' sports K through 12 from biological males competing on them. But it also protects the group locker rooms and bathrooms for both biological sexes. One of the things I want to make people understand is this is about privacy and respect for all students, whether they're male or female. Nobody enjoyed puberty. Puberty is awful and it is uncomfortable, and having to deal with those issues in a locker room is way more than we should be pushing on kids. So we want kids to feel safe and secure at school, whether they're dealing with gender dysphoria or whether they're not. And so Sports and Spaces keeps biological males and biological females in separated group locker rooms and bathrooms. But it also allows the schools the ability to understand what issues they're dealing with and come up with individual school building solutions.
Well, it sounds like common sense is alive and well in Nebraska. How can our viewers and listeners help you up there very quickly?
You know what? February 8th, we have a hearing for Let Them Grow, and February 13th, we have a hearing for Sports and Spaces. We need people to send in written testimony if you live in Nebraska. And if you are close by, we'd love to have you come to the Capitol and testify or just show your support.
All right.
And also, I love the fact that you are saying to send some love to your senators. I tell that to people all the time. Identify the senators who are doing the right thing, because let me tell you, once I dropped these bills, we got bombed.
I can only imagine. Got to leave it there, Senator. Thanks for being with us. We'll be back, folks. Don't go away. It begins here, and here, and here. Every day. Before you stand, you need solid ground. Standing in a culture that wants you to surrender the truth won't work unless you have a firm foundation. At Family Research Council, we have that firm foundation, and you can find us standing. We stand for the value of all human life. We stand for the right of families to flourish. And every day we stand for your freedom to believe and to live out those beliefs both at home and abroad. We work with government officials, educating them on the issues from a biblical worldview. And when necessary, we hold them accountable. We equip Christians across America to be informed and to take action in their communities. With our daily radio program, television appearances, and vast online presence, we reach people where they are. We envision an America where all human life is valued, families flourish, and religious liberty thrives. And that won't be realized if we're not standing. Stand for faith. Stand for family. Stand for freedom. Stand with us at FRC. A recent NBC poll reveals that 71% of Americans say the nation is on the wrong track. Now, with this backdrop of pessimism, President Biden will speak to a joint session of Congress and the entire nation on February the 7th to give his State of the Union address. Will his words match reality and offer a way forward, or will there be more of the same? My policies are working, and where they are not, it's because Republicans won't work with me. Well, as the prophet Jeremiah said to his nation, they had stumbled because they had chosen a different path, not the proven ancient path of God's Word. America needs to return to the proven path. Join me Monday night, February the 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern for the State of Faith, Family, and Freedom in America. Join us for this special broadcast from our headquarters here in Washington, D.C. as we seek to point the nation to those ancient paths. That's Monday, February the 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time at frc.org. Welcome back to this Thursday edition of Washington Watch. We ran out of time that last segment. I do want to encourage you, if you live in the state of Nebraska, to help Senator Kauth on these two important bills. You can find out more at the website, TonyPerkins.com. But if you live in Nebraska, you know how to get in touch with your legislators. But these two bills could certainly use some help. And as she even mentioned on the way out, she said it is powerful when you send a note of appreciation. And I do know what she's talking about. When you introduce bills like this that the left just pounces on. I mean, this is the stuff of cancel culture. You put in this kind of stuff and people want to cancel you, all right? And speaking of the cancel culture, you can get the latest journey in the Bible. We have our 40-day journey through the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah, Courage in a Cancel Culture. And if you'd like to get a copy of that, it's so timely when you look at what is in the Bible and its application to today. But you can get a copy of that by texting Jeremiah to 67742. Jeremiah to 67742. And you get a link. You can download a digital copy. We ran out of hard copies. But you can get a digital copy, and it comes up next month on Amazon. Okay, I want to go to this topic, speaking of cancel culture, of what's happening even this week in Congress. In fact, yesterday, Andy Biggs was on the House floor talking about DirecTV and what it is doing to Newsmax. Play clip number 9.
We know what happens in nations where you have the big government utilizing the power of the marketplace through the big business, and now the marriage of big tech. We know that leads to something that I call fascism.
So last week, DirecTV abruptly removed Newsmax from its platform. Now, the sudden move to cancel the 4th highest rated cable news channel, which reaches about 25 million Americans, led groups of leading members of Congress in the Senate and House. In fact, a group of senators sent a letter demanding information from DirecTV about the decision. Now, the left previously succeeded in its efforts to deplatform conservative network OAN. So this is yet another example of what happens to be when the political left is in collusion with the communication giants. This is dangerous. You can see a pattern here. You know, Is the social media. That was one thing. But now we're seeing cable. This is where conservatives are supposed to go. How do you get news and information? I'm asked that all the time. And we've been pushed off of many platforms because of that, because we speak truth. That's why I'm grateful for Newsmax and what they've been doing. But now they are the target. Well, join me now to discuss this is Newsmax CEO Chris Ruddy. Chris, welcome to the program.
Well, Tony, thank you for having me on. It's great. Let me fix my collar. I'm seeing that here. It's sticking out. So
that's all right.
That'll look prim and proper for your show.
Well, you're a TV guy. You should be ready for that. So let's talk about this. This is disturbing. Was DirecTV's decision as shocking to you as it was to so many others?
Well, I was shocked, even though we had a sort of rough negotiation period, because Newsmax has been around for a long time. We reach a lot of people. We're the fourth highest rated. You mentioned this, how big we're reaching 25 million people. They deplatformed One America last year. It had lower ratings with us than us. I think there was some shenanigans there. But I thought they're not going to do two channels in the same year. And we were new with so many major systems last year, Dish and Verizon and others. And they did. They are a woke company, AT&T, DirecTV, and they do not want to have another conservative channel. They have 22 liberal news channels, Tony, on that system, and they only want to have one conservative channel. They just got rid of two of us in the past 12 months.
This has gotten the attention of lawmakers. I was at the Capitol this morning. I was talking with the Majority Leader, Steve Scalise, and I mean, this is concerning to them because they see what's happening. The noose is being tightened around conservative outlets, and this is how they communicate with their constituents because CNN's not going to give them an opportunity to speak about what's really happening, MSNBC, and even Fox to a large degree when it comes to issues of faith and family and freedom that we deal with here. Those platforms have become hostile. Newsmax is one of the few where that's still accessible. I mean, what's the way forward here?
Well, first of all, I believe that this country was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and people of faith made this nation a great nation. And our Constitution is based on biblical values, for sure. I don't think there's any question about it. I'm a believing Christian, and I believe that Christianity and people of faith, the Jewish community loves Newsmax because we're very open to them and people of faith, and we're a platform for them. They're very disappointed, as are many in the Christian community. And more media is trying to denigrate and downgrade and deplatform Christianity from the public square. And when they look at Newsmax, the woke left people, they don't like us. And, we're not like out. We're, as you know, we try to give balance on a lot of issues. We give both sides. We have liberals on all the time. They don't like that.
That's the point. I mean, I don't think, if you want Christian television that's all about, Christian program, that's fine. I mean, I like that at times. But I want to have discussion. There was a time in this country, Christian, you know this, you're a news guy. There was a time in this country when the sides got together and it was debates, but it was constructive debates. And we work through issues. That's how you reach consensus. But if we only have one side talking to itself and the other side talking to itself, how do you ever come together and reach consensus?
Tony, they don't want to have a debate. They don't want another side. The left is imposing their will. And it's a very scary moment in the United States that they could remove Newsmax. And it's good that there's pushback. In my mind, there should be even more. Remember, this all starts with Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats writing a letter to AT&T and other cable operators saying that they should remove One America, Newsmax, and Fox News. AT&T, which does a lot of business with the government, complied in two of these instances now, the three channels. They have no real good excuse. They said that they did cost cutting. Okay, you're a business. You don't need to be even a business person. Why do you have 22 liberal channels, most of which nobody watches? Newsmax has much higher ratings. You're paying them more than One America Newsmax ever would get from you. You're paying them multiples of it. Wouldn't you cut those low-rated liberal channels and other low-rated channels first that nobody watches?
You and I talked about that, and I think I figured it out. That's the Department of Education's new math. They're operating off the new math. It makes absolutely no sense what they're doing because it doesn't add up to you and I that know that 2 + 2 = 4. But I was thinking about this as you were discussing this. It reminded me of German pastor Martin Niemöller. You might remember the quote that's quite famous. He said, first they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists and I didn't speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And they came for the Jews and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me. And I that's what's happening when it comes to conservative speech. First they went after some of the religious groups. Then they went after some of the weaker conservative groups. They're coming after you. They won't stop with Newsmax. I think people need to realize there's a time to circle the wagons and say enough is enough.
And, we have less and less media. Rush is gone. You're one of the great guys left on radio that really espouse the values. There's a few left, and a lot of them are sort of all over the place. We did get great support today. We have it up on Newsmax. Sean Hannity did a tweet retweeting what John Voight said in support of Newsmax, that we're truth news and that we shouldn't be closed down. And he came out and did a video that's all over the web today. Ron DeSantis came out and said that we were being targeted and he wants hearings. President Trump said that he's so disgusted by AT&T and DirecTV that he's canceling DirecTV. He's canceling all his AT&T phones and services, and he's telling everyone else to cancel. We have told people that if you're a customer of DirecTV or Uverse, you're not getting Newsmax, call them at 877-NEWSMAX. It's real simple, 877-NEWSMAX. We'll connect you right away with them. And we encourage people to cancel because I don't think the option is that they're going to bring us back. They've made no indication that they really want us back.
So give that number out again. So folks, I want to encourage you folks to get a piece of paper, write this down. If you happen to miss it, we do have a link at TonyPerkins.com. But Chris, give that again.
877-NEWSMAX, 877-NEWSMAX, and the operator will connect you to DirecTV, Uverse. And, when they're telling people things like we're still in negotiations, we're not. They're saying you can get us for free. They know the free app's going to end very soon. They claim they have another conservative channel up. Well, nobody's ever heard of them before. You go through this list of things. I feel sorry for them because there's this thing going around the web that says, go woke, go broke, right? And I think that's the lesson really that we have to, if you go for companies like AT&T shouldn't be involved in politics. It's like, why are they even involved? And they're taking very hardened positions on the left now. It's not like they're even being pressured into these things. And I'm so glad that people like you, Tony, and others are speaking out on our behalf.
What kind of feedback are you getting from your viewers that have been out there? All of a sudden they wake up and it's gone.
We heard that over 70,000, maybe 80,000 phone calls have been made now to DirecTV from people that were outraged and want to cancel or refunds or whatever. And we can tell because of the 800 number statistics. We're seeing huge amount of people coming to Newsmax.com. We have a petition page called IWantNewsmax.com, IWantNewsmax.com, and people have been going there. So we're getting tremendous. We look at social media and the amount we were trending for AT&T and DirecTV in the past week. We look at, if you look at anything like on Facebook, if there's an ad for DirecTV, just look at all the comments. It's just one after the other, outraged what they did to Newsmax.
So Chris, all right, so economically it does not make sense. In fact, I was having this conversation with Steve Scalise. You make a profit for them. I mean, you draw people into their network. It's good for business. And this is a trend we've seen in the last 10 years where it used to be, people thought, and it was not always good because the profit drove everything. And that sometimes meant that they did things that were not really good because they were driven by profit. But at least you could kind of figure out their motives and you could kind of, it made sense. This is not driven by profit. In fact, it's counter to making a profit. This is all driven by ideology. And as you said, there was a day when there was the liberals and the conservatives, and the two had conversations or debates. The left doesn't want to have a debate. This is the ideology of the left. Silence your opponent.
they are out to close us down. I mean, we're seeing this, and we saw in the Twitter files with Elon Musk that actually government was working in concert with Twitter to actually censor Americans. This is a violation of basic constitutional rights. I am told by people that follow all of this, if you notice, there's been very little media coverage outside of conservative media like Fox and Newsmax and you. Why? The reason is that government apparently has been working with other media, not just Twitter, and that they're up to their eyeballs. And if we really start exploring what they did, people will be shocked. It's a governments should not be involved in interfering in free speech. They were telling people, Tony, not to report on Hunter Biden's laptop. Now, it turns out that it was his laptop. Now everybody's admitted it. But we were told at the time publicly, and the press was saying, well, it was disinformation from Russia. It wasn't. It was his real laptop.
Well, and they knew that.
And they told us not to report it. It's shocking.
Right. And, I've talked to some of the incoming chairmen in the Republican House who are going to be having some of these oversight hearings. I think the next 6 months are going to be very revealing. And I think some of those things that you just made reference to, how deep the government was involved with some of these communication giants, is going to be shocking to the American public. And I think that's a part of taking you out, because it is Newsmax, it's the OANs, it's the Washington Watches that actually give platform for that information to get out there.
Well, Ken Buck, the congressman from Colorado, Ken Buck has written a great book called Crushed. And he talks about how, in Crushed, he talks about how Google and Facebook and Twitter and even Amazon are trying to close down voices. So that, I mean, he's been a leader in trying to confront these guys. And then Senator Ted Cruz, he's been very powerful, a very strong advocate for going after these big tech guys, Mike Lee as well.
Well, they understand. They understand. Their ability to communicate to their constituents hangs in the balance with communication.
Just to show you how evil these guys are, Tony, we know that in the 16 and the 20 election, Google, which has Gmail, it's the largest email server, took all of the emails from Donald Trump and the Republicans and dumped them in their users' spam box. Even if they wanted them, everything went into spam pretty much.
Yep.
And the study, this was a university study, found that 90% of Biden's emails and the Democrats went in the inbox. That's a $1 billion donation to the Democrats.
Yep. Well, Chris, you're a TV guy. You know what it means when you're up at the top of the hour. We're out of time. I want to thank you for joining us. And again, very quickly, give out that number for people to call.
It's 877-NEWSMAX, 877-NEWSMAX, the website, iwantnewsmax.com.
All right, Chris, great to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, sir. Good to be on with you.
Folks, I want to thank you for joining us and take action, because I'm telling you, they are coming to eliminate all conservative sources of news and information. We have to stand together. Until next time, I leave you once again with the encouraging words the Apostle Paul found in Ephesians 6, where he says, when you've done everything you can do, when you've prayed, when you've prepared, and when you've taken your stand, by all means, keep standing.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you've heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com. Also, to leave a comment about Washington Watch, call our watch line at 1-866-372-7234. That's 1-866-372-7234.